Alright, so today is November 29th of 2023, and got some work done up here, and as you can see, I've been getting more of these smaller pieces on here, and I've got one piece left to go. But what I had to do here before I could get this piece sized, you remember how this thing looked. It was all gnarly and lumpy and out of shape, and so I had to get this thing planed down, get it planed down to my chine point, to my chine line, and then get this worked down as best as possible. So if you remember, this piece of plywood's going to go in, next piece of plywood's going to go in here, and I'm going to epoxy this one in completely, since I got some pretty gnarly stuff going on here. I'm going to completely epoxy that piece of plywood in. And then this area here, when I start doing the bottom here, this is all going to be layers of 1708 fiberglass cloth. So it'll be built up to that 1/2 inch thickness of the plywood. But yeah, you can see I did quite a bit of grinding here by the mess on the floor. And I again used about everything available to me. I used the planer, the power planer for the rough majority of it. Then I used my grinder with that cut-saw disc, which is kind of coarse too, to get it a little bit closer. And then I used a flap wheel on the grinder to get it even closer yet. And of course this will all have to be faired and prettied out, after we get the plywood on the bottom here. But this looks okay. It worked probably better than I thought it would, or it came out better than I thought it would. But I got this piece here to put in, and then I also had to do a little bit of, some of these had proud edges, so I had to plane them down in a few places too. This wood's been warping, and again, it's wintertime here, and in the winter it gets very dry. The air gets very dry, and so things really dry out, and then the wood can split and warp and twist, and so I've been having to deal with some of that. But once this plywood's on here, I think that's gonna stop 99.9% of that, twisting and moving anyway. But yeah, so we've been working on that. I got one piece to put in there, and then that whole top row is, or middle row is done. And here's the last piece that's going in up there. And I'll probably trim the excess fiberglass off this one today. It's taken 2 days for it to tack, to get tack free. So I'll probably get the fiberglass trimmed, flip it over, get the copper naphthenate on the backside later today, and then tomorrow I'll get another coat of epoxy on. And then it'll be, once that's dried or cured, it'll be ready to go on the boat. But that's where we are on the boat in that respect. Here, with this bearing in the stuffing box, do not really have any real pertinent information, I guess, on that. I asked him about this, if this is supposed to be stuffed completely full, this 8 inches of stuffing. And his response was, well, it is a 2-inch shaft. Well, it was yes. And I said, oh, really? You're supposed to put 8 inches of packing in there? And he says, well, it is a 2-inch shaft. And it didn't make sense to me when he said it. And then later I thought about it, and I wonder if he was talking about the circumference of the packing being 8 inches long, which somewhere in there it would be. But that wouldn't make any sense either, so I don't know what he was talking about. But anything else we talked about was non-productive. So what I'm going to do, I'll just make up my own decisions on this and not try to rely on anyone else's decisions. So what I'm going to do is I ordered a bearing, another cutlass bearing type thing, a sleeve bearing to go in here. It's 8 inches long, which would fill this space up, which then would leave no room for packing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that in half, and I'm going to use 4 inches of it in here to help support the bearing up here. And then I'll probably machine a little washer type thing to go in here that has a surface like this on it. This little bit of a concave or angled surface to hold on the packing. And then that'll drop in. Then we'll put our packing in. We'll put, you know, 2 inches or 2.5 inches of packing in, and then this will go in and compress. I see no reason why that will not work, and I will have to notch these out just a little bit. I'll put it in my milling machine, and that'll be fine. So we're going to go that route, and the idea is to give the shaft as much support as possible. The shaft is going to be supported at the aft end by this bearing, the cutlass bearing. It's going to be supported at the forward end at the thrust bearing for the Aquadrive unit, and this will be about 2.5 feet behind that thrust bearing where it's hard mounted to the thrust bearing. So that'll shorten the length of the shaft that's unprotected or unsupported by about 2.5 feet. Now we're still talking about 12 feet of length between where the shaft alley comes out inside the boat and in the aft end here where it comes out, which is a longer stretch than is recommended. You know, for this 2-inch shaft size, I think it was 10 feet some odd inches is what the calculations came out to be. When you do the precise formula, the rule of thumb is even less than that, but when you do the precise formula, it was over 10 feet, and we're talking, you know, about 12 feet. So what can happen if the shaft is too long? Well, the shaft can bend in the middle and whip and cause vibrations, or it, you know, potentially could whip enough to rub on the shaft alley inside. But vibrations probably is what we're going to have to deal with if we have a problem with it. So what happens if this doesn't work? Well, we'll have to put an intermediate bearing in somewhere. We'll have to literally cut the keel open and put an intermediate bearing in there to support it. Do I think that's going to be necessary? Probably not, especially if I get this this bearing in here. I think we're going to have plenty of adequate support for it. But we'll see. Worst case scenario, if something doesn't work, we'll have to put an intermediate bearing inside there somewhere. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. We're talking 930 RPM is wide open throttle. That will be the RPM on the shaft. And it's just not that much. I think it'll be fine. But if it's not, yeah, we'll deal with that. You know, when it gets the first time it gets pulled out, we'll have to deal with that. But you know, this has worried me, you know, ever since I started building the boat, to be honest. I mean, I've been doing these, looking for information on the internet, reading all the, you know, books that deal with this subject, the drivetrain subject, and doing all the formulas and the calculations, and trying to figure out what other people did. You know, and some people I've seen them, they're doing the stern tubes, just putting the shaft inside a stern tube, which isn't a completely tight fit. So it's, I mean, it would support the bearing to a certain extent, you know, if it started wobbling in there or bending in there, but that's not really its intent. So I don't know, other people have built these boats and it's worked. So I think I'll be all right, but I have been a little concerned about it. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to enlist a professional's advice on this stuff. And the problem is doing that, when we started this, when I called the dealer about these things, it was like 5 months ago, 4.5 or 5 months ago. And we started talking about it, described everything to him. I sent him a link to a video of the you know, the drive system and the boat and the shaft alley and all that. Told him what I had going on, showed him what I had going on, and wanted his advice on a system. Well, he made a recommendation. I agreed, and he ordered the parts, or was supposed to order I told him to order the parts. Well, 2 months went by. He told me that they were back, or they'd have to make them at the foundry. Well, 2 months went by, and I asked him for an update on them, and he'd forgotten to order them. So then he ordered them. So another 2 months goes by, 2 months plus goes by, and then they come in. So he had forgotten, I think, probably a lot of what we talked about. I'm sure he's got a lot of things he's working on, and you know, talks to a lot of different people. Got probably bigger concerns than me, but yeah, it didn't work out. I mean, it's fine. These are exactly the housings that I had picked out even before I talked to him. These are exactly the housings that I had picked out. So if I had just done this out of the blue on my own, I would have ordered these 2 housings also. So yeah, it's fine. But I mean, I'm just gonna have to rely on my own judgment going down the road for things like this. But anyway, that's what we got going here. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna try putting a cutlass bearing in here, and yes, I will have to tap a couple of holes in here for some set screws like what we've got here. Is the material thick enough for that? Yeah, probably. It gets a little thicker down here, so it'll probably go down here a little farther. So yeah, I think that'll be all right. I can't imagine it would go anywhere anyway, but most of those cutlass bearings, once they've been in there for any length of time at all, they're almost impossible to get out. So we're gonna go that route and hope for the best. I have been looking at shaft and props now. Obviously, I'll be getting those through someone else. But yeah, I probably get those ordered here in the near future. Don't know how long that'll take to get them, but there isn't a whole lot I can do, frankly, until I get the shaft. I can't mount these bearings on either end until I have a shaft. So yeah, I can get this measured up now, and we'll get a shaft and a prop ordered. So anyway, that's my update for the 29th of November.